All right, this is the Open Policy Hour. I'm Einar Bolin. I'm the policy analyst at ARIN. I'll give you an overview about what we're going to do tonight for an hour. We're going to have a draft policy preview, which is the quick review of the 7 draft policies that are going to be on the agenda later this week. We're going to have the policy experience report by Leslie Nobile. And then we're going to move to the policy BOF, which is the presentations by attendees here. And I already had a couple people sign up, Bill Herron and Chris Tassett. I saw Bill, I know Bill Herron's in here. Is Mr. Tassett in the room? All right, thank you. Is there anybody else that has something that they want to talk about that might even have a presentation or something they want to bring up at the Open Policy Hour? Now's the time to raise your hands, just so I can get an idea of how much time I can give the other folks, when we get into that session. So is there anybody that has something they want to talk about specifically? I don't think so. All right. All right, so let's get started. The draft policy preview. When you register, you should get one of these things. It's the discussion guide. It's got rules of the road. It's got all of the policy texts that are going to be presented on Wednesday and Thursday this week. There's 7 draft policies on the agenda. They're spread out through the agenda Wednesday and Thursday, starting after lunch actually tomorrow. And if you haven't read these policies online or on the list, they're in here. This document, the discussion guide, also has summaries, and it's got the staff assessments, which include the implementation assessment, the resource impact, and the legal review. So it's a good idea to check them out. Second bullet there, the PDP says that the ARIN Advisory Council is going to decide what to do with these draft policies when our public policy meeting concludes. So that's the whole point of, well, these draft policies have been on the list for at least 35 days, and they're going to be presented, and when the conclusion of that happens on Friday afternoon, the AC is going to meet and decide what to do with these. So if you have opinions about these draft policies, the place where you have to state them is on the list or at the meeting Wednesday and Thursday. This forum here is not for feedback. It's just to give you a preview of what the draft policies on the agenda are going to be. So 2010-8, rework of V6 assignment criteria. We have existing V6 assignment policy. This is going to change how we do assignments directly to end users. So currently we have a policy which essentially says if you have V4 space or a couple other criteria, you can apply for V6. This policy is going to significantly change that policy. 2010-9 IPv6 for 6RD. This is one of 2 transition proposals for obtaining V6 space to transition to from V4 to V6. This one and another one in the list here will allow ISPs, for the most part, to request an additional V6 allocation for the purpose of 6RD, which is 6 rapid deployment. 2010-10 is a global policy proposal, which means it has to be discussed and adopted at all 5 of the RERs. And this is a policy about what to do with the last, almost messed that one up. This is one about how IANA can issue space after the last /8, after the last /8s are gone. So there's I think 14 /8s left. When 9 of those are issued, the policy for issuing 1 of 5 /8 to each of the RERs will kick in. Then this policy would go into effect and allow the RERs to request space from the IANA. Previous to the exhaustion, this sets up a reclamation pool, and if IANA obtains space, that's what the RERs can try to request. 2010-11, required resource reviews. We have a resource review policy right now which allows ARIN to conduct resource reviews, and it sets limits on how often ARIN can do it, but it doesn't tell ARIN exactly when we have to conduct resource reviews. This draft policy stipulates when ARIN has to conduct reviews. 2010-12 is the other transition policy that I was talking about. It allows a V6 allocation for generic transition technologies, not limited to 6RD. 2010-13, permitted uses of space reserved under NRPM 4.10. So we currently have this policy that's not in effect yet, which when Aaron gets its last /8 is going to reserve a /10 for V6 transition. And this proposal is would change that existing policy to make the whole /8 be reserved, and it would add to that pool space that's returned to Aaron, and it essentially establishes different types of customers and different pools that they can draw from. 2010-14, standardized IP reassignment registration requirements. This draft policy has several different components to it. It essentially redefines organizational information. It better defines what a residential customer is. It replaces an existing cable-only V4 address policy and expands that to something that the policy calls residential market areas. So essentially it would open this cable-only policy to DSL customers, Fios customers, that kind of thing. It also extends this cable-only policy to IPv6. It changes reassignment policy, which is what has to be registered when you assign space to customers. And it authorizes, it makes clear that Aaron is authorized to do another resource review when the criteria as listed here happens, which is basically not complying with reassignment policy. So that was pretty fast, but once again, the text, there's summaries and there's text in the discussion guide. And there's AC members that are here, and some of them are shepherds of these draft policies. And if folks have questions about these things that they want to ask the AC members, if you go to the website, you can see who those shepherds are by looking up each of these draft policies, 2010-11, for example. It'll tell you who the shepherd is. It's also listed in the discussion guide. Thank you, David. So are there any questions on, that's a preview to help you think about what's coming up this week and see if there's something that's of interest to you that you didn't know about before. And if there is, help you prepare for it. All right, if there's no questions, let's move on. All right, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. So this is the policy experience report. This is staff's opportunity to review existing policies to ensure that they're working the way they're supposed to be working, and then to share that feedback with the community. So we review existing policies. We're looking for the effectiveness. Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? Are there gaps? Are there inconsistencies? Are there ambiguities? Then we identify some areas where maybe some new or modified text might be needed, and we base this on our operational experience. Of course, we have a lot of interaction with our customers on a day-to-day basis, and based also on customer feedback. Sometimes customers will say, this just doesn't work for me. We provide feedback to the community, and we make recommendations to the community. This particular policy, I've only got one that I'm going to review, and this is really more of an informational review of the policy. We don't have any recommendations on how to change the policy because it is what it is. This is talking about 4-byte ASNs and the current situation with them. So it is NERPM in our Number Resource Policy Manual 10.3. It's the IANA policy for allocation of ASN blocks to RARs, dealing with 2-byte and 4-byte ASNs. The text reads as such. I'm going to read it. I don't typically do this, but just to share what it says. IANA allocates ASNs to RARs on blocks of 1024 ASNs. In this document, the term ASN block refers to a set of 1024 ASNs. Until 31 December 2010, allocations of 2-byte only and 4-byte only ASN blocks will be made separately and independent of each other. This means until 31 December 2010, RARs can receive 2 separate ASN blocks, one for 2-byte only ASNs and one for 4-byte only ASNs from the IANA under this policy. After this date, IANA and the RARs will cease to make any distinction between 2-byte only and 4-byte only ASNs and will operate ASN allocations from an undifferentiated 4-byte ASN allocation pool. So this policy was just changed. It was recently ratified by the ICANN board. It is a global policy. And prior to saying December 31st, 2010, it was December 31st, 2009. So we actually had to change the policy, the way we were issuing ASNs on December 31st, 2009, or January 1st, 2010. So the way we implemented the policy, our current practice is that we assign the lowest numbers first, thus ensuring that the 2 bytes are issued first, because we know that our customers continue having problems with the 4-byte ASNs. So we give the customer an option to choose 2-byte or 4-byte, and then we actually go back when someone does say, I want a 4-byte, we make sure that they really want the 4-byte before we issue it. And we will exchange a 4-byte ASN whenever we are asked, because we know there are still issues out there. So that is our current practice. These are some stats about 4-byte ASNs right now. So the policy was implemented in 2007, early 2007, I think sometime around January. And since that time, we've had 448 requests that specified 4-byte ASNs. 379 of them changed their request in mid-process to 2-byte ASNs. And then we ended up issuing 69 4-byte ASNs over the past several years, 3 years or so. And then 42 of them came back to us and exchanged them for 2-byte ASNs. And as of today, Aaron has only issued 27 4-byte ASNs. And the typical reason is that the upstream says their routers won't support 4-byte ASNs. So this is the global 4-byte ASN stats. So on the left is all 5 of the RIRs and how many 4-byte ASNs we've all been issuing over the past several years. You can see that RIPE has issued more than any of the other RIRs. APNIC has some out there. LACNIC has some out there. And then you see Aaron and Afrinic way down there. Aaron's in blue. We have not issued many at all. As I said, I think we have 27 out there today. And then we know that all of the RIRs have issues with the 4 bytes being exchanged. So when you look at the right slide, each of the RIRs, it shows you how many have actually been changed or exchanged for 2 bytes. So, you know, it's significant. RIPE has had over 200 exchanged. Afrinic hasn't had many. APNIC hasn't had many. That number, that's actually the exchange number, but we still, like, as I said, had 300 and something actually. People changed their mind and they changed the request in mid-process. And then LACNIC has had only 4 exchanged. So the current situation, as I just said, many of the 4-byte ASNs are still being returned, particularly in our area, for 2-byte ASNs due to lack of router support. The global pool of 2-byte ASNs is almost depleted. There's only 8 blocks of 2-byte ASNs left with the IANA. And the policy changes on 31 December 2010, and IANA is not supposed to make any distinction. So they will start issuing blocks of 4-byte ASNs. We can't go to IANA after December 31st and say, I want a byte of 2-byte ASNs. So it means that between now and December 31st, any 1 or 2 of the RIRs can go in and pretty much deplete the remaining pool of 2-byte ASNs, and there won't be any left. And basically, the bottom line, I guess, is that network managers and router vendors have to ensure that their networks and products are compatible with 4-byte ASNs. And I know there's, you know, fixes in the works, but not sure what the status is currently, but I know that our customers are having difficulties. So, John Curran is at the mic.
What's this game again?
It's on.
Okay.
You're good.
I don't actually need this, but okay. So John Curran, President and CEO, Aaron. If anyone out here is aware of a network service provider who will not accept 4-byte ASNs, please drop me a private note so I may have a discussion with them.
That's right. So that's all I have. Are there any questions or any discussion amongst yourselves?
Scott Librand, Aaron AC. You mentioned 8 blocks of 2-byte ASNs. Are those 1024 blocks?
1024
okay.
blocks. There's actually one block that's a bit short. I think IANA's got several of the, I think maybe 10 of the ASNs reserved for some purpose. So.
David Williamson, Microsoft, tell me, could you flip back to the slide with the bar chart? So eyeballing that, LACNIC has successfully issued something like 100 4-byte ASNs with 4 returns.
That's what it says. LACNIC also issues blocks of 4-byte ASNs to their NIRs, so NIC Mexico and NIC Brazil get those, and those are included in
And that's
that.
probably including the APNIC as well.
I believe it probably is, yeah.
And I'm looking at this, and outside of Africa, which is still just small in general, it looks like other regions, even if it's not huge volume, are successfully deploying this. And I'm pretty sure other regions don't have some special advanced technology that allows them to do 4-byte ASNs versus, say, North America. So I mean, as an operator, I'm baffled that people haven't taken the step, and this isn't really feedback for Aaron. I think you guys have the same message. I'm just baffled that people haven't done this already, and I don't know what we can do to get the message out more aggressively, but it's kind of ridiculous.
I can tell you one thing from an Aaron perspective. Can I go, or do I have to call on someone?
I was just going to supply some numbers.
Okay, that's good. From APNIC, good, great.
No, not from APNIC, for the world.
In general, from the
This
world.
is advertised 4-byte AS numbers currently seen in the routing table, so this is not something that's quiet, you can see them. AFRINIC, they allocated 14, 2 are visible. APNIC allocated 172, 47 are visible. ARIN have allocated 28, 11 are visible. RIPE, 642 allocated, 420 are visible in the routing table. Doesn't seem to be a problem. LACNIC, 264, of which 87 are visible. So as far as I can see, ARIN is a little bit weird that there are only 11 4-byte AS numbers visible in the routing table.
Heather, are you?
Just to say that maybe this is something that would be really good for someone to mention, tomorrow on the last day of NANOG before everyone goes home.
I think
Again.
John actually had a slide
Did
on
you?
it in his Aaron update.
Okay.
So we did mention this. I don't know if there was any discussion.
Was there
but
any, did anyone say?
No
All right.
discussion.
Maybe everyone was glazed over and reading emails.
There was one person who raised his hand and said that he didn't support, there he is.
Louis? Louis, do you have?
Hi, Louis, NRO Number Council. At least in IPv4, there's an agreement between the RIRs that they would only take 2/8s at a time. Is there something like that for the 8 blocks that are left?
We'll let John answer that.
The NRO EC Executive Council, made up of the CEOs of the 5 RIRs, is actually, so for point of clarity for everyone, is writing down that agreement in writing so everyone can see it. And as part of that, consideration has been given to making a corresponding statement about the amount of AS numbers that can be drawn down at any moment as well. So hopefully, the answer is soon, yes, clearly, and documented in a way that everyone can see it. It's important these assumptions about how we do operational draw are documented so that people can do things like forecast depletion. So, yes.
Hey, Leo.
Leo Bicknell, ISC. I might be able to remove some of the confusion about this in that having tracked 4-byte ASN capable code from several vendors for my day job, several vendors made some very odd choices about when they were putting the 4-byte ASNs into their code. And so you may have had people exchanging for 2-byte ASNs as recently as several months ago because the code just came out several months ago. And while today everybody can legitimately raise their hand and say they support that, they're kind of chuckling under their breath because they've supported it for a week. So the historical support problem may literally have just been fixed in the last calendar year, and so maybe we're in a little better position going forward. It probably would have been interesting. I know some people tried to put together a full table of when the vendors supported it, not just in general, but on a specific platform. Certain vendors held out on some very popular platforms for backbone providers for a very long time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, is that it? Thank you.
Okay, so we move into the BOF session. So I know about 3 talks already. Has anybody come in, or is anybody here that wants to be added to the list and speak on a topic? In addition to the three talks that I already know about. All right, so I don't see anybody, and we have a half hour left, so we're gonna give each of those speakers approximately 10 minutes to talk about those topics. So the point of the BOF is to present a policy idea in an informal setting and get some instant feedback from you guys, and hopefully, or possibly find some people that support their idea. One more, okay, well then we will do that. What's your name, please? Matt Peterson, thank you. All right, there's no commitments in presenting here. You can continue the discussion informally. You can take it on PPML, that's for policy discussions. That doesn't have to be official proposals. You can submit a policy proposal if you'd like, or of course you don't have to do anything just because you've come up here and talked. So those are the rules, and I call the first speaker, which is Bill Heron. And Bill, you wanted to do cutouts.
Okay, so I'm William Heron, and I'd like to ask all of you to stop using cutouts. And what is a cutout? A cutout is a more specific route from an ISP's address space that's used by a multi-homed downstream customer. And it's distinct from other types of more specific routes like traffic engineering in that it's only used for those multi-homed customers who are perhaps using it with that ISP and definitely using it with a different ISP. So why is that bad? Well, you gain nothing. It uses the same number of routing slots and the same number of IP addresses. But the problem is that the traffic engineering in the BGP table looks exactly the same as these cutouts. You could probably filter out some of that traffic engineering. But if you filter out a cutout, not only do you damage their network connectivity, you damage yours. So because they look the same, you can't filter any of it. And that traffic engineering costs you quite a bit of money. A small fortune, in fact. About 4 cents per route per router. According to the Sutter report, there's about 120,000 of these de-aggregates. Somewhere around 150,000 BGP routers out there. Works out to about $750 million a year of your money. And you can't filter it because they look the same. Whether it's a de-aggregate for traffic engineering, a de-aggregate for that cutout customer, to your router, that's indistinguishable. And by the way, your customers hate it too. Cutouts mean that they have to renumber if they decide they don't like you anymore. And that's both expensive and painful. But as bad as this is, as bad as the cutouts are for you today, they really wreck the future. The Routing Research Group has been looking for a number of years now for ways to make routing less expensive. And one of the classes of technologies they keep coming up with is something called map and cap, which creates a kind of dynamic tunnel system through the internet so that particular destination routes don't require their own BGP route in the table. And it's pretty simple how that works. You send a packet, there's no route for the destination in the BGP table. So instead of dropping the packet, you send it to an encapsulator. The encapsulator looks in a map and finds one or more decapsulators that can handle that packet, wraps the packet up in a tunnel packet addressed to the decapsulator, and sends it on its merry way. Does not work for cutouts. With cutouts, the ISP's covering route sucks that packet out into the internet where it eventually dies. So if we've got cutouts in the table, this isn't going to work for us. So what's the solution? The solution is stop requiring small multi-homed organizations to get their addresses from the ISP. If you're multi-homed, go get your addresses from Aaron. And as we move to IPv6, don't allow cutouts to start. We're not using them yet. Just from the get-go, have multi-homed organizations get their IP addresses from Aaron, regardless of size. So in conclusion, cutouts are bad. Please, let's stop using them. Again, I'm William Herron. I appreciate you listening, and I would welcome any comments or questions.
Dave Meyer. I'm just wondering why you think mapping and cap scheme, I can think of a couple ways mapping and cap schemes might break down under certain kinds of deaggregation, but what are your assumptions? Because if the address spaces are disjoint, it doesn't matter.
I'm not sure I follow what you mean.
If when you do mapping and cap, what you do is you build a new namespace,
Yep.
and that's the identifier space, and then you have this locator space. The locator space works exactly as today, no difference. So if you can route a packet today to a more specific, mapping and cap does not in fact affect that. So I was trying to understand what you were trying to say and what your assumptions were.
That's correct, but it means that you can never extract those routes from the table. So they're there now, you're stuck with them. Whereas
Okay,
you
well,
could conceivably...
A24 or more. There's already policy for multi-homed end users to get IPv6 space directly from Aaron. What Aaron policy is needed to address your concern that doesn't exist?
The current policy allows 24s if you have enough hosts to qualify for a 24. Otherwise, you have to get a 24 from your ISP based on the fact that you're multi-homing. I would suggest changing it so that you can get a 24 period based on multi-homing. And then the same with IPv6, which currently is complicated, but oversimplifying it, it's essentially the same rules. If you have enough hosts to have qualified for a /24, then you can get a v6 48. And I would suggest adding multi-homing by itself as a criteria for getting a 48.
I'd be fine with that. By the time you can get it done for V4 policy, I don't think it'll matter, but I would support that policy in V6, absolutely.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that you're right, but if we at least get it done for V6, eventually V4 will go away. Not soon, but eventually, and it would be nice if this problem could go away with it. Rear mic?
Jason Schiller, UUNet, Verizon, NRO-NC. Certainly an approach to multi-homing, traffic engineering, mobility, etc., that is architectural and doesn't require leaking of more specifics would be great. When I can have it in running code and I still get all the current functionality I get today with traffic engineering. As we've heard earlier in the NANOG meeting, this might not be as easy as it sounds, and we've got some very big questions that we need to spend some time grokking about.
Certainly.
In the meantime, I'm not sure I understand your point about the particular class of address a multi-homer uses. A slot in the routing table is a slot in the routing table is a slot in the routing table. So I'm not sure why there's a distinction between a more specific of a PA block that could be aggregated but will negatively impact their traffic engineering capabilities versus a direct allocation that's very small that can't be aggregated that you have to carry no matter what or lose reachability to?
The issue is that the more specific that you could discard, you're able to make a choice to actually discard it if it doesn't help you. For example, if it's traffic engineering for somebody who's 4 ASs away, you could discard that route if you knew that that was only a traffic engineering route. But because of the cutouts, you can't know that that's only a traffic engineering route, which means that you can't discard it. Did that answer your question?
No, I'm not sure I followed.
Let me try the phrasing cutouts. Sorry, I'm Chris Morrow. I work for Google and I'm on the NAC. The term about cutouts is I've never heard before. So, but I think what you're saying is that there's a customer like a UUNet customer who has their own ASN and they get address space from UUNet for whatever reason that is.
Right.
And they happen to be multi-home. They announce they get their /24 from UUNet space. They announce it to UUNet and they announce it to AT&T.
Right.
UUNet suppresses that route because it's part of their.
They don't.
And well, you may.
We don't.
Hopefully not.
No, he's talking about a third party could suppress the route.
No. What I'm saying is that in his example,
In his
which
example,
wasn't
Sprint
suppress the
could
route.
suppress the 24 and fall back to the 19.
Right, and the UUNet version of the 24 survives. So the route actually.
But if the multi-homer has a
guys-
direct
Wait. Yeah. So anyway, the point was, you still get reachability through Sprint. You just don't see the route, but they're suppressing the route so they have it. I mean, either way, there are customer Sprints. They're on the internet. You're going to carry the route regardless, right? So.
Guys, tell you what, I'm going to be around all night. I'll be around at PI after this. I will be more than happy to answer further questions on it then. I understand we've got to move on here. So, but I'm right there. I'd be happy to talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. We're on a fixed agenda. We have to keep moving.
Are you going to put the next one in there, or do you want to move on to my next one?
Let's do your next one.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so as much as you loved the last one, I would like to ask you to dedicate just a few more brain cells to our old foe classful addressing, because I think it has some things to teach us about IPv6 address management. In particular, I'd like you to look at classful addressing not in terms of what it was 20 years ago, but in terms of how it would look with today's technologies, which was that there were basically 3 pools of addresses that the internet was divided into, and in each pool there was a specific prefix size that was allocated. And if you received an allocation from that pool, you only received it in that specific size. And if you look at that in terms of today's routing technology, that has an interesting property. And the interesting property is that when you see a route within that, within a particular class, you know immediately whether or not it's whether or not it represents that allocation, or whether it's an error or a traffic engineering route, because it doesn't match the size, which means that anything that doesn't match the size is potentially discardable without damaging your connectivity to the rest of the internet. And that's, of course, important because traffic engineering is expensive, $750 million this year alone. Cutout problem, just talked about it. There's another problem too, which is the variable subnet problem. In order to determine in sitter whether or not a route matches the assigned address block, you'd have to have some sort of database lookup, where with classful, you don't need that. It makes it much cleaner and gives you an ability to algorithmically tell the difference. So Classful failed us. Let's take a look back and remember why. The main issue is there weren't enough Class Cs for everybody who needed more than there weren't enough Class Bs for everyone who needed more than a C, and there weren't enough Class As, period. So instead of allocating a Class B to someone who needed 6 Class Cs, we gave them 6 Class Cs, and they routed all 6 Class Cs, and before long we came pretty close to crashing the routers with too many routes in the tables. And then when Sitter finally came along and we finally got the ability to announce something that didn't match the prefix size, we started allowing folks to take these cutouts with them, so we immediately lost any potential to control this traffic engineering problem that Classful took care of for us without us ever realizing it. So if Sitter created the TE problem, or if you prefer, if it made it possible, what can we do about it? Well, we're stuck with it for IPv4. We've already allocated the addresses. But with IPv6, maybe there's a different way to do things. Original Classful was protocol defined. This first set of bits was this class, this first set of bits was that class, period. Talking about Classful in terms of modern technology, we'd be looking at far more flexible registry-defined classes. So, for example, you take an ionic allocation to Aaron and split it up into several pools, and then from each of those pools, you assign exactly one prefix size. So, if you need more than a /48, you get a /40. You don't get multiple /48s. And it doesn't suffer IPv4's Classful's problems because there are plenty of /32s for people who need more than a /40. And if we run out of this pool of /32s, we just add another pool. There's plenty of space in the addressing to do that. And this flexibility of doing it at the RIR level allows us to classify addresses based on criteria other than just this prefix size that we're assigning. We can pick any criteria that's important to us for deciding whether or not to include a route in our routers table. For example, if you wanted to allow multi-homers to place routes in your table because that's how the protocol functions, but you wanted to restrict what you would accept from single homers that are essentially wasting your address space, you could do that through classifying the address pools from which they receive addresses. You could do it for critical infrastructure like DNS servers. And in fact, Aaron already does this to some extent with a specific v6 pool that's critical infrastructure that is not a part of the other address pools. So as helpful as that could be today, it potentially does more benefit for us tomorrow. Map and cap, I won't go over it again, but you've seen the technology before. The thing about map and cap is it needs registered addresses. You have to have addresses that they know that the recipient knows are valid for you on the internet. But if every address that you can get a hold of is valid in BGP, why would you use it with a map and cap technology? I wouldn't, and probably neither would any of you. However, if addresses are available for use with map and cap technology, and potentially available very cheaply because they're not going to consume a BGP route, you've classified the address pool that they come from so that they're not allowed in the BGP table, that can potentially drive adoption of map and cap and potentially give provider independent addresses to everyone again without exploding the BGP table. So in conclusion, I'd like you to take a look at classful addressing and see if there's lessons we can learn for IPv6 that are a little more insightful than just don't do it. Again, I'm Bill Herron, and appreciate you listening to me, and I'd welcome any comments or questions about this, or I guess also the last one. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, please.
Can you go back about 3 slides? Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, there. Okay. So what happens when a single home customer becomes multi-homed?
They can keep their addresses, and it's still in the single home block with whatever the rules are, or they can change addresses to the multi-home block and gain whatever benefits of the rules are.
But what's the point then? So at some point down the line, this space becomes so polluted because folks have changed either from multi-home to single. I mean, what's to prevent someone from saying, okay, well, there are more benefits to being multi-homed. I'll go ahead and get my whatever, and then downgrade to single home. I mean,
right.
So
right.
you're gonna end up with pollution and that not meaning very much.
In this particular space, you'd put some rules in the other direction, so that if you go from multi-home down to single home, there's maybe some period of time you have to return to multi-homing, or you lose the addresses.
That's worked so well already. Sorry,
Sure. I agree.
I mean,
I agree.
seriously, we have policies today that say that, and if you look at, and maybe Jeff Houston's done this, I don't know, but if you look at the number of ASs allocated in theory to get an AS, well, he would be the guy that would do it. If you get an ASN, in theory, you've shown that you are either, you are eminently going to be multi-homed. But how many ASs actually show up behind 2 other, distinct ASs? Like I said, Jeff Houston probably knows, but I'm sure that there's a lot of singly homed ASs, and that's just one example.
Sure.
And a lot of folks who've qualified for address spaces, by being multi-homed, who are no longer multi-homed. Well,
Sure.
no one's not, banging down their door saying, sorry, we need to downgrade you now. We're taking some of that space back. So
Sure.
I'm just kind of pointing out that, it gets quickly polluted. And then, we kind of had some of that when we started with V6, right? So it started out that only ISPs, or there was only provider aggregatable space, and the minimum allocation size was 32. There was no other, you could get a larger than a 32, but there was no other allocation size. So, and everyone clamored for, well, we need PI and we need, other allocation sizes, and we're going to be discussing a policy that, potentially you're assigning 48s on nibble boundaries, or, getting 32s and various different sizes that don't necessarily fit into this kind of model. And you still have the problem of, I don't see what you're gaining by putting folks into this, because they're still going to want to do traffic engineering through deaggregation.
Sure.
Unless something like your map and cap, but I'm sorry, all the other proposals to do multi-homing by some other mechanism that is not deaggregation have stalled. And they're not going anywhere. And that needs to get fixed before you change the addressing policy.
I'm sorry.
All right, we're going to have to limit folks to a quick question or comment, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to let Bill answer. He's going to have to answer you guys when you go out to social, hopefully. And I would like to point out, though, that the current V6 assignment policy is from a distinct prefix. All the assignments Aaron makes are from a specified range. So I think Leo was up first. Quick comment or question, please.
Yeah, Leo Bicknell, ISC. It seems to me that if your proposal were to be successful, if I put myself in this world and we all bought into it, that the result would be virtually 0 TE routes in the table. I think that's kind of what you're going for. Maybe not exactly 0, but greatly reduced compared to what we have today.
I think the point is
Yeah.
the point now is to identify who you should talk to after the meeting.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Leo Bicknell then. Sorry, Jeff was muttering because he had her answer. How many are multi-homed? If you want to know, he does.
All right, thank you, Leo. Front microphone, Lee Howard.
Lee Howard, Aaron, Board of Trustees. Yeah, no. I can hear me. Just give him a second. Try it now. Lee Howard, there we go. Lee Howard, Aaron, Board of Trustees, and Time Warner Cable. I don't have a particular opinion on a specific proposal, of course. I like the Venn diagram presentation you've done here. I do worry about cases where which part of the Venn diagram you might overlap into. It also seems to me that I think our community will need to see on map and cap to understand better how that works. And it also seems to me that this is designed to enable the development of certain routing policies that I actually think probably that the community needs to determine best practice routing policies. And there are some of us who are working on a forum for determining best current practice. So I think that all that work may need to happen before we can give consideration to a more classful allocation policy.
All right, David.
David Farmer, Aaron AC, University of Minnesota. I want to thank Bill for bringing this up, and please put the pitchforks away and think about what he's asking. This is an example. This is a bad example, but it's the easy example that we all can understand. There are other possible uses for this classification mechanism, and we should think about that and not get stuck on the particular bad example. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much. And I'll be available throughout the evening for anyone who'd like to talk about it.
All right, next up, Chris Tassett.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's my first Aaron policy session, and it's a very exciting and interesting meeting. So I'm here on behalf of a company called Tech Savvy Solutions, a Canadian member, to talk about a problem that's unique to the Canadian environment. And it has to do with ISPs that are using the cable platform to provide services. A few years ago, the CRTC, which is the equivalent to the FCC, mandated the cable carriers in Canada, the large ones, to provide this service. And Tech Savvy is now implementing that. It's taken a leadership position in this area. And we've had a problem getting IP space. And the problem results because of the way that the cable network is basically configured. Instead of being able to get a dynamic allocation of IP space for the cable carrier's entire serving area, it has to be done by CMTS interface. And that means that it basically is done on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. So when you have a new entrant who's coming in, what it means is that you're not going to get the same utilization that you would if you're the incumbent player, the owner of the infrastructure. So there'll come a time when you try to move to another neighborhood or another city where you're going to ask for extra ISP space and you're not going to be getting, and you're not going to be able to get any. It's a serious problem for us as kind of the first competitor trying to have a meaningful impact in this area right now. And it is a problem that we hope we can get some help from you folks in solving. The 80% utilization rule is just very onerous in that particular situation. So, would like, if anyone has some thoughts right now, I'd certainly love to hear them, and then we'll go from there.
Jeff Tremblay, Videotron. Well, being the one who actually configures your address on our CMTS, we actually gave some thought to that. I agree that's a real problem. I think the only maybe midterm solution to that problem is to actually ask the CRTC to lower the size of the regions that we configure, in which we configure a single TPI, third-party internet access provider. That might be the only short-term solution. We haven't found any other solution, technical solution to reduce the number of addresses that we use on the CMTS to configure you guys actually. So.
Okay, just to clarify, what do you mean by, by asking for smaller regions? Are you talking about more POIs to serve the same serving area?
So right now, the way it works, if you guys ask to serve a specific region, we have to configure you for all of that region. There's no exception to that. So all the CMTSs in the single region have to be configured at the same time with a prefix that is the same size. So right now, for example, we use /28 on every CMTS for a single region. The Montreal region, for example, has over 100 CMTSs, and you need 228s by CMTS. So it means a third-party internet provider would have to get at least a /20 in that region to cover the whole region. And so the equipment assignment percentage is really high, but the utilization rate in these regions is really low actually. It's under 50% pretty much all the time. So that's the problem we have to solve here. And besides reducing the size of these regions, we haven't found any other way to do that for now.
And you view that the only way to do this outside of ARIN would be the CRTC process, is that?
Well, that's a process that takes time. I do agree with you.
Okay, all right. Thanks for your suggestion.
So before you sit back down, I'd like some clarification. The /28, you said 2 of those per CMTS. Is that because the CMTS has 2 RF interfaces?
2 bundles.
2 what? Okay, 2 bundles. All right. I tried unsuccessfully to be a Videotron customer in 2005 or 2006. So I'm and by customer, I don't mean in my household. I mean that the company that I was working for, Inter.net. If you know Sophie Liget, she was my boss. The problem here is that solution actually doesn't fix the problem, because there's a larger problem in that you want to advertise across a major metropolitan area and not in, we have this in this neighborhood but not in that neighborhood, and pretty soon you've burned your whole 30-second radio spot with qualifications about not available in some areas. It is problematic. I'm glad to hear that Videotron has moved to a /28 per CMTS, because their gambit with us was, I believe, a /24 per interface per CMTS, which I understand that, but the 2006 was not early on. I mean, I have a problem believing that things don't move forward there just as they do on everyone else's network. I'm sympathetic to the early stuff, right? But it's I should probably state who I am and who I'm with if there's a video feed going on. My name's Rob Seastrom, and I work for Affilius. I'm on the ARIN AC, and I do not have a horse in the open access race at this point. My question is sort of a larger question, though, which is if we were to somehow be able to make this perfectly wonderful today, come to some sort of agreement that would make things work for IPv4, would it be relevant at all because of the impending exhaustion of IPv4? Would it not make more sense to focus this discussion on IPv6, since it seems clear that for legacy v4 access, especially in this sort of setup, that there's going to be some sort of carrier grade NAT or some sort of interim thing, which is the preferred way of taking care of new customers after there is v4 exhaustion.
I think the problem with that suggestion is one of timing. The reason we've come here, and I'm here with Rock Gaudreau, the CEO of TechSavvy, at this meeting, is because of the urgency of the situation. We can't compete today, so that's an even more urgent problem than the IPv4 exhaustion from our perspective.
We couldn't compete 4 years ago either, so I share your pain there.
But we're in the market now and trying to be the trailblazer and doing the best that we can. So we hope we can find a way through this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Kathy Aronson. I'm the Air and AC. I wrote the cable policy in 1997, maybe. So the intent of the policy, I'm not entirely sure of the implementation of the policy at this point, but when I was doing cable, you had to put a 24 per CMTS, and we had a big block, and before we knew it, we had no block, and we had to deploy new markets. So the intent of the policy, and the way I originally wrote the policy, was that to get more address space, for a new region, you had to have 50% of your address space swept, which I don't call utilization, okay? And to put new address space in an existing market, it had to actually be 80% utilized,
Right.
okay? And that policy fixes your problem.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't know how the policy is applied now, but the policy that I wrote totally fixes your problem. So I don't understand what the problem is. You know, like, I don't understand why the problem exists at this point.
Well, we'll, and maybe it's a question of working with staff to work through that. That's a great suggestion, so thanks for that.
I'm happy to talk to you, help.
Thanks.
Right. Last one, or, well, I guess I'm the last one in the moment. Joel Yegley, Nokia. I suspect that relief in the form of policy options is likely to take longer than you have. And so...
Is that personally or from a competitive standpoint?
No, it's not... No, I mean...
I was just joking.
Right. I mean, I don't mean that to be flip, but like, you have a business and competitive need which you have to address,
right,
I think, rather quickly, and you have impending exhaustion, and if the engine of customer growth for you is new IP addresses, you're in real bad trouble.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for hearing me out.
Marty, go ahead. One last comment.
Hi, Marty Hannigan, Akamai Technologies. Thank you for your presentation. So the point you made about this being more urgent than the depletion of IP address space rings very true. I think that you're going to find that you may not actually make the next meeting. There will be no time to get a proposal in. And I wanted to point out just generally to the folks in the audience, and this isn't so much for you, but I think you may hear a few times at the microphone in the coming days that perhaps considering the urgency of time and continued real problems with IP4 access, that we ought to consider doing something like getting something on PPML real fast now that we can try to get some real soon consensus on, and kind of giving the board some guidance that if things really get that urgent, that they can actually use their emergency powers to the benefit of the community and solve some of these problems if there's consensus to solve them and there isn't other policy from 2000 whatever to take care of your problem. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This has all been very helpful, and I appreciate all of your input. Bye.
Thank you, Chris. All right, we have one last speaker, Matt Peterson, asked to speak. I know we're running a little late, but we're really close to the social since it's right across the street, or right across the hallway, rather.
Matt Peterson, Square Incorporated. Long-time user, first-time speaker. And not a long-time Windows user, so. Okay, so this is called Rent to Return. So basically, there's a number of large events that I've been involved with that utilize Aaron resources for a very short amount of time. One of them happens to be in the desert. This past year, actually this year, about 2 months ago, they were using the /23. Pretty big deal when you've got 50,000 people out there. Other large events that are more close to home, developers conferences, large events at conference halls, Moscone and San Francisco being an example. Why should Interop be the only one in town? So RIPE figured this out quite a while ago. RIPE has an informal policy that is now being drafted as a formal policy. The link is listed there. This has historically been used for the Chaos Communication Congress, which is sort of like NANOG meets Burning Man anarchy or something. But in this particular event, they have a /16. I was made aware of this when I attended one of their campouts in 2007 and got an Ethernet drop 1 gig with V4 and V6 to my tent. So that was pretty impressive. And the great thing about it is when I did a WHOIS, it was a temporary allocation. Really exciting stuff there. So basically the proposal is this. Obviously this was put together 3 minutes ago. The idea here is some sort of allocation that's large enough for events that utilize large IP networks. So a decent amount of space. This is geared for end users, not ISPs. Ideally, these organizations would already be familiar with ARIN policies, how to fill out the forms, paperwork, meantime between getting allocations, that sort of thing. Very important that we would have some sort of contractual agreement. You've got to get rid of the space after you're done with it. There shouldn't be any limitations, right? So when people think about Burning Man in the press, they think, oh, it's a bunch of hippies in the desert. It's actually the 10th largest city in Nevada that week. 50,000 people, you have emergency services, you're ordering food. It's a big deal. We had 48 VLANs there this year. It is a big deal when you're setting up an event like that. Optionally, it'd be great if this was paired with an ASN. That's become a very popular filter thanks to drinking boffs that have occurred at NANOG. People are used to having little hijacks occur, so it would be really useful to pair that with an ASN for that allocation. And very important, the middle point there is the maximum period ideally would be 3 months or less. So this would be useful to many organizations. That's it.
Hey Matt, Marty Hannigan, Akamai Technologies. How are you today?
Good to see you.
Would you like some fries with that? So I don't quite understand. So first question, why can't they use NAT?
NAT is not a network.
Okay, why can't they use IPv6?
V6 doesn't work in the real world.
Okay, and how much would you like to pay for that? How much would you like to pay for those addresses based on some of the work that you've probably seen presented earlier, which they might actually cost you something that you can't afford to pay? So let me just add a couple other things. So you're setting these networks up temporarily, so actually finding them, pushing things toward them, name servers and all that stuff, I imagine would not be part of the deal. You just want to throw some networks up, use them and take them down and give the address space back to Aaron, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't support this. Thanks.
Okay.
So Rob Seastrom, Affiliates, Aaron AC, and Professional Skeptic. So I guess my first question would be, do you believe that there will be the resources to cover renting these networks? Because obviously you're going to have to pay somebody to rent them from, if you know, when you're looking at the directed transfer market post depletion, which is the earliest you can expect this to go through. I mean, there won't be any more IPv4 addresses by Burning Man next year.
Right. Well, to be clear, these networks are already being built. And typically what's happened, and the reason I'm proposing this, is typically ISPs are hoarding IP blocks that are utilized for a week, right? So if they own the contract for a large event, you know, a Salesforce or an Autodesk or WWDC, some large event with 10,000 attendees, what many ISPs will do is just say, that SWAS-22 is used for that event 1 week out of the year. That's ridiculous. That's why this proposal came.
It's no more ridiculous than Net 45 is.
That's before my time.
So as a practical matter, have you talked to the Illuminati, for lack of a better word, the people who run the interop stuff, and said, hey, you know, it's not like they don't share their networks with other events?
Interop has offered informally, but I think that's a large enough allocation that it would be difficult for networks to utilize like a /8, right? Because there'd be a lot of DOS traffic, that sort of thing. Some of these networks don't have lots of capacity.
Well, they have 16s, and the whole that whole interop thing, you will get informal offers and it will be provided informally. And if you were looking for some sort of like letter or, certificate or something like that, it's not how it works. It's very old school in that way. So I encourage you to go forward with that, not in the least because they're a great bunch of guys and I've worked with them before.
Yeah, no, I that's what's been suggested a number of times, and I agree that's a good strategy, but it shouldn't only be friends and family, right? There are other people that build networks that don't necessarily attend ARIN meetings and know about interop or know that that connection exists.
Which gets us back to the original question, which is once you get all the word out to them and everything, will there be any IPv4 left?
Good question.
And you're talking some bucks to get that out of the post-depletion market.
Right, so that's why I'm suggesting it now. Obviously, it's fairly late in the game, but I think it's a more useful strategy for a lot of these events. It's a one-time, they would still pay for it. I'm not suggesting this is like a freebie or something. They would still pay for that allocation and resources, but it could be utilized much more efficiently than waiting for companies to fold and it, go in the back.
I'm not thinking that they'll think that it's free. I'm just saying that it's going to be exponentially more expensive than ARIN membership is.
Right, but those resources, like you said, V4 is going away very fast, and for a lot of these networks, the black market is not an option for them.
Right, but the post-depletion market is, and I would be happy to collaborate on getting a proposal together for something like this. I just worry that where the rubber meets the road, it may be too little, too late.
Yeah, I would like to see Jill's hair, though. Thank you very much.
Mics are closed.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah, I was still in line. But I'm sort of wondering why IPv6 is not the right choice for fire-breathing snails and naked people. Joel Yeagley, Nokia. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. Thank you for adding that to the OPH. Thank you, everyone, for staying. Sorry we ran over. The social that is happening right now is across the hall. It goes from 7 to 9. And in addition to that, there's another social from 9 to 12 at the Cosmopolitan Lounge. And no, I don't want to reboot.